Good evening, everyone. Sorry, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the February 10th, 2021 version of the FTAC virtual workshop. My name is Kevin Walford. I'm the FTAC administrator for the TPO. And today we have this is one of our latest versions of our virtual meetings. One of these days we'll meet back in person. When, I do not know. Let's go ahead to the next slide. First thing I want to do is welcome our new FTAC members. And we've been trying to get new FTAC members for a long time. And so we had one new one last month, and we got two more this month. So now we're exploding with members. Their new members are Mackenzie Flurmond and Mike Silver. Mike Silver is not here right yet, but Mackenzie, if you want to just unmute yourself and just say to everybody hello and who you are.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be with you guys. My name is Mackenzie Flurmond, and I am a city commissioner in the city of North Miami Beach. I was appointed by Commissioner Jean Monesteem of District 2, and I look forward to working with the team to advance the mission of the Miami-Dade TPO. Thank you so much, Mr. Walford, for welcoming me, and I'm ready to work.
Okay.
Welcome to the group.
Welcome, Commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then Mike, you just logged on, so you welcome back, and it's your turn to say hello to everybody.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully everybody is well. I'm very pleased that I was able to come back on the committee. And I look forward to working with all of you. And again, this is good news. It took a little period of time to get here, but here I am. So let's have a good meeting.
Okay.
Welcome back.
And I think, let's see. So we have, we're noting attendance. We're not keeping track of it for purposes. But let's see. We have 1, 2. They're only missing. Only having 3 people who aren't here. Our members who aren't here as of yet. All right. So we have Juan Flores, who's our vice chair. We have John Dome, George Corzo, Mackenzie Flurman, Mike Silver, and William Bill Arata. All right, let's go to the next slide, please. This is our agenda. First thing I'm going to go over is our rules of engagement. Next slide. I know you've all seen this before, but for the official record, it needs to be done each time. Just so you know, this workshop is being held virtually and being recorded. If you experience any technical difficulties, please contact Lisa Wan at the phone number and email you see on your screen, so that she can assist you with any issues. You can also need to message her through the chat on privately, so that way she can probably see that too also. All attendees will remain muted during the duration of this workshop. If you wish to provide a comment, please use the raise hand button. The chair will first acknowledge you, and then your microphone will be unmuted. Please proceed by first providing your full name, agency represented, and then your comment. Your microphone will remain unmuted until the comment has been fully addressed. In compliance with all applicable rules and regulations, no motions or actions shall be permitted. Discussions shall be limited to matters listed in the published workshop agenda. Permissible discussions include presentations, questions and answers, and comments related to the presentation. Any committee member deviating from these guidelines will be reminded as to limitations in any such discussion. Please hold all comments until the presentations are concluded. Next slide. All right, so we have a one item on the to be presented today. There'll be an MPOAC Freight Priorities Program, the call for projects for 2021. And the presenter is going to be Michael Williamson. Mike, you have the floor.
Thanks, Kevin.
And Mike, Lisa will be controlling the site, so just let her know where you want to do next slide, and such.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks for inviting me to come down and speak to you all virtually on behalf of MPOAC. This is the fourth year that we've been doing this Freight Priorities program. It started in 2018. And even prior to that, with the creation of the MPOAC's Freight Committee. And one of the key efforts and one of the key priorities they identified early on was, what can we as an MPOAC Freight Committee do on behalf of all of Florida's MPOs to try and advance and prioritize key freight projects? And so this program was developed to do that. So what I'm going to do today is give you a quick overview of that program and give you some examples of what's happened over the last 3 years. And then hopefully if you have any questions about the types of projects you'd like to see Kevin put forth on behalf of the TPO for 2021, I'm certainly here to answer any questions on how to go about doing that.
Hey,
Next slide.
Mike, this is Juan. Just for the benefit of the people on this call and just anybody listening in, can you tell them the significance of the MPOAC, which I don't know any other state that really does something like this and coordinates the business of MPOing altogether, and then specifically freight, and wherever the chair and vice chair is right now, that would be great.
Sure. So the MPOAC, the MPO Advisory Council for the state of Florida, it has all 27 of Florida's MPOs are represented in various names. Obviously, we have TPOs, TPAs, MPOs, and it's an opportunity for them to come together on a regular basis. I think it's 4 times a year to talk about issues that cut across all MPOs. So Federal Highway is usually in attendance at all those meetings. Florida DOT is in attendance at all those meetings, and to talk about all the different requirements and activities that MPOs are required to do that's overseen by those 2 agencies. And they've had some different subcommittees and breakouts over the years to focus on topics that do cut across all MPOs, things like resiliency, different certifications MPOs have to go through. And as Juan mentioned, it is somewhat unique to Florida. There's no other state that has anything just like it. There are other states that do try to bring their MPOs together in some way, but it's not as formal of a process as this is. In fact, for any of you who know, I mean, there's a full-time executive director based in Tallahassee who works closely with DOT on this program. And the Freight Committee was one of the subcommittees that was developed, and it was really spearheaded by Greg Stewart from the Broward MPO and Gary Hutman from the Metro Plan Orlando. They are the chair and vice chair of the Freight Committee. And so it's fairly unique. And as I walk through the program, you'll see the intent was to take that MPOAC umbrella and to take advantage of that from a freight perspective, which is, if we go to the next slide, you can see, well, in the next couple of slides, I'll introduce that a little bit more. So as I mentioned, what I wanted to do today, just give you a little bit on the program purpose overview, and then talk through some examples. So you can see the intent of the program here was really to provide MPOs with yet another opportunity, if you don't already have one, to identify what your top freight projects are on any given year that you would like to get into the DOT's work program. If it's already in there, maybe you want to accelerate it, advance it, maybe it's only partially funded. And then use that list, use the MPOAC's united voice to promote that to DOT. And so that's really at a high level, big picture, what the intent of the program. Next slide. The program itself, in order for an MPO to participate, this is a highlight of it. I'll go through some more on some of the next slides, but it's designed to allow each MPO in the state to submit up to 3 projects that are there, and they don't, it's not, we're not doing a 1 through 50 priority for the state. We're giving each state, each MPO the opportunity to say, these are my top priorities this year. And so you can see here in that first box, 3 projects. Since we're trying to influence DOT's decision, we're focused on projects that fall on the state highway system or the national highway freight network. I'll talk about the distinction for that a little bit as we move forward in the slides. And we want it to be a project that's shovel ready or can be accelerated or advanced. So ideally it would be post PD&E or have a PD&E underway, or at least funded in the work program. And it really needs to be able to accept, money to advance to the next step. One of the things we did add after several years of the program was a requirement that our MPOs partner and coordinate directly with the district freight coordinators in each of the DOT districts. Some of our district freight coordinators, as Carlos can attend to for District 6, have ideas of what their freight priority projects are for a given district as well. And so by getting the MPOs to reach out and share their thoughts on what their priorities were early in the process with the district freight coordinators allows better coordination. In some cases, you both may be promoting the same priorities. That all gets submitted through a process I'll walk you through quickly here today. And we review those projects, make sure that you all have provided enough detail, enough information for us, for Carl as at the MPOAC to be comfortable putting his name on it to say this has been vetted for consistency and completeness, and we believe these projects are ready to move forward. As I talked about, close coordination with DOT is critical, both at the central office and at the district level, to make sure that they are aware of what your priorities are and this whole process is timed at this time of year because this is when DOT starts gaming the work program for their annual update. We also go through an approval process at the end later this spring, where we get the freight committee to approve the list, the staff directors to approve the list, and the governing board, all within MPOAC's umbrella. Next slide. So just going into a little bit more detail, as you think through the type of projects that you might want to suggest Kevin include on the list, again, up to 3. And I think everybody's probably familiar with the PD&E process. Project development and engineering, preliminary project development and engineering. And that's really what most capacity projects go through to make sure that they have all the checks necessary to actually move into construction. It usually precedes preliminary engineering and then goes into any right-of-way purchases and construction. So we're really trying to have projects, again, fall on the state highway system and be past that point or have that process underway. And again, that's how we are assuring that they have the ability to accept funds. And projects that could accept funds could be projects that are currently unfunded. So maybe you have the PD&E fund in several years ago and you're looking for a preliminary engineer, maybe looking for right away, or maybe you've got everything done except construction. So this is an opportunity to ask for that construction dollars. And some big projects may only have the first couple years of construction funded. So this is an opportunity to ask for the remainder of the funding. The other thing this program is designed to do is give MPOs a chance to say, hey, you may have my priority project completely programmed in your work program, but it might be in the outer years. And is there anything you can do to accelerate that? And that would be moving different phases of the project forward. Next slide. So again, in order for an MPO to submit a project to be included on this list, we have a checklist that's designed to take folks through a series of questions. Kevin is very familiar with it at this point after doing it for several years, where you describe the project, the extent of the project, the location of the project, what it's intended to do, a project description, how it's related and important to freight mobility in your particular jurisdiction, et cetera. That gets submitted to MPOAC. And then it's reviewed for completeness. We go back and forth with MPO staff as necessary to make sure that all the information has been provided. And then that information is used to develop the list to go through our approval process and ultimately transmitted to FDOT to hopefully influence the decisions they're making on priorities. Next slide. And I think I've talked a lot about this, but you can just glance at it while I highlight a few things. So some of the things that we learned early on was to ask for URLs that take us directly to your TIP or your long range plan or program, and in some cases right down to the page number, because lots of times MPOs will tell us projects are in their TIP or in the work program or in the long range plan or in their cost feasible plan. But as you know, now that we've started the update process, there's all kinds of draft versions and last year's versions out there. And when we go through and do our review, sometimes it's hard to find that exact project So we're asking folks to be as specific as possible on where that project is documented. The reasons we would follow up and ask additional questions are, in some cases, there might be missing data or incomplete data. So we ask, for example, for you to quantify things like truck volume on a particular segment for your project. And we also ask what year the data is and what your source is. Sometimes folks might just give us the AADT, but not tell us whether it's 2017, 2018, 2010, whatever the case may be. So again, we're just looking for complete documentation. We can go on to the next slide now, I think. The final vetted projects, again, go into the project list that gets published and shared with folks. And one of the things we also learned early on is if we just provide DOT with a single table that says, here's a list of projects, it's a good, quick review for them, but it doesn't tell them some key things that they need to know. So for example, does the project fall on the National Highway Freight Network? Does it fall on the Strategic Intermodal System? These are types of things that help distinguish which funding programs the DOT needs to look at to see if they can advance or fund a project. So one of the things that Holly Monroe had asked for early on after the first year was, can you please provide us additional information and summary statistics about each of the projects that lets us know how much money are you asking for? What are you asking for? Is it an advancement? Is it new funding? Is it accelerated funding? And what network does it actually fall on? Next slide. So since we started the program in 2018, we've tried to improve upon it each year, as hopefully Kevin can attest to. We get feedback from the MPOs each year about what worked well, what didn't work well. We do training sessions each year to walk folks through it. And that's when we did things like the first year we neglected to ask an MPO for a dollar amount for the project. So we said, what's your most important project and what do you want to do? But, you know, we forgot to ask how much money they needed or what they actually were looking for an action. So in 2019, we revamped it to be very specific on what exactly are you asking the state to do? Is it to fully fund? Is it to fund something that has no funding at all? Or are you just trying to advance something? We also tried to simplify checklists and instructions. And then going from 2019 to 2020, based on FDOT feedback, we added in, you can see on that third sub green bullet, we added in a request that district freight coordinators be an active part of the process. So we've asked the MPOs to work with them. Some MPOs tend to work hand in hand with their district freight coordinators and reached out to them just kind of naturally or organically, and others we encouraged to do so. The other thing that came out of the 2019 lessons learned that was applied in 2020 was to give the DOT an interim list of projects. As I mentioned, I believe, and Carlos can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the freight office is in the process of calling for projects. I think Ricky had mentioned it was in February that they initiate the call for projects for their work program update. So we've backed up this program each year by a couple weeks to try and make sure that we have a list to DOT early enough to actually influence change. And in order to do that, we've agreed to provide them with an interim draft list basically as soon as we have it. So this year, the MPOs are being asked to submit projects by March 12th. We're hoping to have a draft list to share with DOT, not all the detailed backup, but a draft list of the actual projects by mid to late March so they can consider that when they're going through their process. And prior to us being able to give them the formal adopted and approved list in early May following our April 29th MPOAC meeting schedule. Next slide. Sorry, my connection might be slow, otherwise it was just coming in really slowly. But this is just an example of some of the instructions that we provide. So you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, that's our newest part of our checklist. That's our district freight coordinator checklist. So the top half of the sheet talks about how important it is for an MPO to coordinate with their DOT partner. And then the bottom list of bullets or check boxes is just some ideas of, introduce yourself to them, get to know them, share your ideas of projects. So it just kind of begins to formalize that process for any MPO that wasn't already doing it. And then I'm not going to go through all of the other things, but you can see we also provide detailed instructions. The middle screenshot here is the first page of I think a 4-page document. The first 2 pages provide an overview, which is largely summarized in this presentation as far as what we're asking, dates, due dates, and what's eligible. But then we actually provide an annotated submission form, which is what you see as the 3rd screenshot here, where we go through and we tell you exactly what we mean by each of the questions. So we've basically providing a narrative of what to enter and what we're looking for. And that was all gone over in our training sessions. And I know Kevin attended our first one that was held this morning. Next slide. I mentioned this earlier as far as project funding eligibility and how what types of funding programs that we're trying to deal with. And I think everybody's probably familiar with some of the different programs that are out there and different system designations. When the FAST Act created the National Highway Freight Network, it also created the National Highway Freight Program, which provides state DOTs with additional funding that can be spent specifically on freight projects. I know you've been probably briefed on that several times. I believe the 2020 freight mobility plan, Florida's freight mobility plan, funded 64 or so projects out of that National Highway Freight Program over the next 5 years, and for over $300 million. So it's a pretty significant dollar amount, specifically related to freight-only projects, but it can only be spent on National Highway Freight Network. Then we also have the strategic intermodal system, which I know you're all familiar with, which is another part of the network. There's obviously overlap between those two systems. And most of your districts are involved in allocating and prioritizing projects on other state roadways and in consultation with their MPOs. And so that's really where we end up with our requests for it being on the state highway system or the National Highway Freight Network. I can't recall if it's on the next slide or not. I have many versions of this presentation at this point, but one of the things that we wanted to call out was any MPO that has a project that's on the National Highway Freight Network, which happens to be a segment that is not part of the state highway network, that certainly would be eligible for this program to be included on this list. All right, so project competitiveness. We get a lot of questions from MPOs when we do our training on whether or not this is something, what can they do to make their project more competitive and to try and get DOT to fund it. And how, what should we be doing moving forward to try and ensure that these recommendations are acted upon. And so some of the lessons that we learned was you can't just develop the list and submit it in May and walk away until next year. You need to be working as an MPO with your district freight coordinator, and MPOAC needs to be working with central office FTAC contacts to say, hey, was it useful? Did you use it? What did you fund? And we need to do a better job on giving you all, and probably that'll be a question you have, is what actual projects have been advanced in 3 years. We don't have a comprehensive list of that, but what I can tell you is that when Holly and Ricky go through and do their freight prioritization process, which is a quantitative process where they give different points to projects, when we created this program, they added it to that list of quantitative metrics. And so if one of your projects is on their list, it gets more points than it did before. The other thing we wanted to call out here is anytime an MPO is working to submit a build or infra or other competitive grant, we want you to be encouraged to include those projects on this list, even if it's in addition to the 3 that we've asked you for, because we want you to be able to hold up this statewide MPO freight priority list as part of a grant application and say, my project is on this year's priority list for Florida's MPOs. Next slide. So I mentioned we are entering our 4th year. This is just some highlights of the MPOs that have participated so far. So beginning, you can see just the kind of the comparison between 2018 and 2019. A little less, or actually right about half of the MPOs are participating. We're getting 30 plus projects. The majority of DOT districts are represented, and most of the projects fall on the CIS. Many of them fall on the National Highway Freight Network. They've all been included in plans. They represent significant dollar value. You can see we didn't have a dollar value in 2018. As I mentioned, we neglected to ask that important question. In 2019, we made up for it and had over $2.7 billion worth of projects, albeit there was one in District 7 that was over $1 billion. So the following year, the number wasn't quite as high. And we're also trying to document just how well these projects are supporting Florida Transportation Plan goals. Next slide. And this was last year's recap, so just a little bit more detail on them because it was the latest year. We had 18 of the 27 MPOs, so and again, just over 30 projects, the majority of districts. What was new on this one is the bottom left-hand corner where we're talking about projects that also represent district freight coordinator priorities. So the majority of those did. A majority of the projects do tend to be capacity projects for roadways. Again, majority of them are on the CIS or a locally defined regional network, and several of them still remain on the National Highway Freight Network. And in this case, our funding request exceeded 1.2 billion. So it just gives you a little bit of a snapshot of the group of projects that are moving forward. Next slide. And this is just the MPOs that participated in 2020 as a snapshot. So we can go on to the next slide. So we looked at what happened in 2020. As I mentioned, it did include projects for infra and build. You can see them here. One was I-95 interchange at Oslo Road. It wasn't included as an MPO priority, but it was a District 4 grant that went in, so it was included on this. Port of Palm Beach rail, it was an on-site project, a rail on-site and port road improvements. So one of the things about including competitive grant applications that we allowed last year, and by the way, we're a little bit flexible each year with trying to accommodate new and different requests that come in. But when the Palm Beach TPA reached out to us, they said, well, we really want to include our Port of Palm Beach grant application as part of the list. And we said, well, it's not going to be something that you're influencing DOT funding on per se as the original intent of this program, but if it represents an infra grant that you're looking for MPOAC to support as a TPA priority, we absolutely can include it on the list with that asterisk. So that's when we're looking at some of the other project types that we were able to include. Next slide. And one of the things we do each year is we communicate with folks just the geographic coverage and location of the projects. So you can see all the blue lines, blue segments on here represent by DOT district where those 32 projects are located. So you can see all but District 2 had projects in 2020. And interestingly, as you know, one of the questions we got from North Florida TPO up in Jacksonville was, our priority freight projects are not highway projects. What are we supposed to do with this list? And so they've been pushing us to try and expand the program to cover rail improvement projects, for example. And so we're still working through ways to try and enhance the program for non-roadway projects. Next slide. This slide, and let's go to the next one as well. These are just district blow-ups. So you can see your district in a little bit more detail. And so the second slide has District 6 on it for you to take a look at. And then you can see the project that Kevin had submitted last year. Yeah, so go to the next slide. And it was for the Golden Glades truck travel center was your priority project included last year. And so this is the type of information that we're providing to DOT. The project name, the county, location, whether or not it was a priority for that MPO, and then information on the FM number. Did you coordinate with your district freight coordinator? What is the project category? In this case, it was truck parking. Does it have a completed PD&A? In this case, it's done. And then the project cost that you're looking for. Yes, it's on the National Highway Freight Network. Yes, it's on the Strategic Intermodal System. So that's the kind of information that we are providing at the state level for the list. Next slide. And this is what we are doing this year. As I mentioned, the call for projects went out February 1st. We've updated all the instructions, which I've gone over at a very high level with you folks today. We do 2 training sessions to go in detail through the submission form. Our first one was this morning. Our next one is next week. We've asked for submissions by the 12th, upon which we will provide DOT with an interim list as quickly as possible. And then we'll go through our vetting process with all the TPOs and MPOs to see if we have any questions, with the ultimate goal of getting final approval from the MPOAC Freight Committee, staff directors, and governing board, so we can formally transmit the list to FDOT following that April 29th meeting. And I think the next slide is just a question slide. So if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them as best I can.
Any questions for Michael? Great presentation, Michael.
Okay. How do I request to be on mute? Am I on mute?
No, you're not,
we hear you.
George.
No,
Go
you're
ahead,
not.
please.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Hear you.
Well, I have to say, Michael, that's the best presentation that I ever heard from someone in a car. It was just amazing.
Wow.
If there is an award for that type of presentation this year, I'm gonna send your name. You know, it was very clear and very good. I'm
He's
not
on
very
the
familiar.
5G network.
It must be. And maybe the question is for Kevin. Who would those usually come up with the, like the recommendation for projects? Is that something that the TPO initiates, and then perhaps at FTAC will, be presented, or is it something that the FTAC committee can nominate the projects? I wasn't around when, the 2018 or maybe I was, I don't remember, but I'm not sure of what our
No, George,
decision would be.
the projects are determined between myself and Carlos Castro, the District 6 freight
All right.
freight coordinator. What we're doing here now with this presentation to the FTAC is doing our due diligence, so you all can see what's going on, but at the same time, bringing it to you so that we can see on here if there are any potential projects that you all may be aware of that we're not of, because obviously you're always you're always searching for ideas. So there may be something that may be going on, let's say, for example, in Medley that you think is then we would not know. If we don't know that, then you'll bring that to our attention, and then we would Carlos and I would then do that as part of our own vetting to see which projects that we heard of would be potential application material, and then we'll go from there.
Well, Medley, we are fortunate that DOT and TPO, we recently completed the freight study. We're one of the first one, and it's still valid. So there's a list of projects there. Michael mentioned something that I'm of interest to me, and he mentioned, I think, a city up north, Tallahassee, something that inquired about rail projects. And coincidentally, several times, not last year because the pandemic, really, I don't know how to tell you, but up until that point, there was the, we were exploring the opportunity that it was being considered with the inland port about extending rail. We were not sure of how to treat that, because that was an issue that did not came about as a result of the freight study, you know. So I mean, we're not ready for it, but maybe next year, or you know, as we explore this position with our partners, you know, at TPO and at the county and DOT, you know. But I was just curious of how was that inquiry received, and if it's something that perhaps in the future it could be considered, you know, as well.
Carlos Castret's hand raised, so
Okay.
Go ahead, Carlos.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, guys. For some reason, I thought the hand raising button was not working, so I kept pressing it. I don't see the icon on my name, but nevertheless, I figure I kind of give you a little bit of my take on the presentation. I'm not going to put Mike on the spot. He did excellent considering, right? He's in the car. So good job, Mike. One thing I wanted to point out and remind the committee, and by the way, I'll get to Mr. Corse's questions and comments, but if you go to slide number 20, let me talk a little bit about it, and that's the actual project list. Talk a little bit about the Golden Glades Truck Travel Center, the next one, where we show the project. Let me just highlight the importance of having these priority projects in this list. As Kevin pointed out, you know, we come up with this list between the TPO and FDOT District 6. We have this discussion, and we have an understanding of the priorities at the district level, obviously with buy-in from our leadership at the local level here with our secretaries and our transportation development directors. But you know, it works. This process works very well, and this is a perfect example how this project it showed a cost of not $5 million. Obviously, the total cost of the project itself was more than that. But one way we were asked with this prioritization process, we were asking for an extra $5 million in funding. That was essentially the ask with this process, and we got the money. You know, we were able to show and make the business case as a priority for the district. We got a little bit of money, close to $3 million in additional construction dollars, and an additional $1.8 million for owner's representation as we move forward through the owner's representation process when we start moving forward on delivering the facility. So just wanted to highlight that. In terms of priorities, I'll tell you that I think that Mr. Corse may be happy to hear that we have been kind of working behind the scenes, outlining and having that discussion with Kevin and the TPO as what the next priorities are going to be for the district and for the TPO in terms of freight for this list.
Okay.
And the interchange of the Palmetto and US 27 is the top of the list. That's a mega project. And there's an adjacent project right next to it. So that is really at the top of the list as a freight priority. I still have to discuss it with our leadership here in District 6. We may have to figure out the details in terms of production to see if we can really accelerate that project. Right now, I believe, and my memory serves me correctly, the project itself, has a letting of fiscal year 23 and maybe late fiscal year 23. We're going to try to see if we can bring that in a year, right? Accelerating delivery of the project. That may require, of course, moving some funding from fiscal year to fiscal year. But, you know, those are the things that we're looking at on this end. And as Mike pointed out, you want to be, you know, the candidate list of projects that we're looking at, you know, have to be post PD&E, right? You want to have at least the end of design phase, and we are with this project. And by the way, I'd be more than happy to kind of show you a graphic of what we're talking about to the committee if you allow me to have control of the presentation here. But, you know, I'll defer to your judgment if you want to proceed. But the interchange, I don't know if you folks have actually looked at the interchange itself, Palmetto and US 27, highly complex. So several ramps, and that's a high priority for the district, and it's a high priority freight project, I think, for the general area in Miami-Dade County. So as far as the freight efforts and the freight planning efforts I've done in the past, specifically in the town of Medley, those are still valid. And I'm actually working again behind the scenes, figuring a way to bring those into a work program or outlining the funding pots to be able to bring those projects and those recommendations into reality. So that kind of gives you a little bit of feedback in terms of priorities, in terms of projects that benefit the area.
Oh. Carlos, I think you mute yourself.
Yes, I did, because I had completed my pitch here, but I'll stay on while we take some questions or comments or feedback.
Well, Lisa said that she can give you control of the screen if you want to show what you wanted to show.
Okay, so let me I should be able to accept, right? And show the screen. Okay.
So does that, you have your own document, correct, that you're going to show?
Yes.
All right.
All right, let me stop sharing, Carlos, so you can
Okay,
share.
yeah. All right, so now let me. And let me show you. Screen here. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
See the PDF with the Okeechobee projects, correct?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, so this is various projects in Okeechobee, and the ones we're talking about are actually on the far right. It's the interchange, and I'll kind of show you a graphic here. Can you guys see that interchange?
Yeah.
Graphic? That's what we're talking about. This is a high priority project, and this is certainly going to be more than likely going into that list. This is one of them, but I wanted to give you the chance to react. This is looking west, okay, into the interchange itself, and then you have another one here, which is looking east towards the beach. So various ramps, and that's what we're talking about in terms of priorities. I have other priorities and other potential projects, and I'm going to sort those through our process and then have that discussion with Kevin and TPO. But as it stands right now, and it's actually two projects, there's an adjacent concrete project right next to the interchange. So, and those are actually going together as a single construction contract to minimize impact. So we'll try to see if we can actually bring that in 1 year, and instead of fiscal year 23, so we can bring it into fiscal year 22. So that's one example of the priorities and the work that's being done behind the scenes.
Mhm.
All right.
All right. Any other questions for Mike? Yeah, you have one more, George, or you were just?
No, I'm just saying, no, I don't.
Okay.
Great presentation. Thank you.
Mike, this is Juan. You know, now that the new administration and the focus, or regarding resiliency, sustainability, was there any discussion with the MPOAC or any other folks looking at that kind of different world of intermodalism, if you will?
The last couple freight committee meetings for the MPOAC have not been workshops due to they're not in person and they have some limitations in what they can do. So
Right.
It's been more about rolling out this program and call for projects, very kind of process oriented. So there haven't been, I think normally their January meeting is more in line with what you're asking, which is would they brainstorm and talk about what's going to be next. And they've been delayed a bit on some of those conversations, I think in large part because they need to be meeting in person in order to do anything authoritative.
Right.
But that's a good point.
Yeah, I bring it up for the folks who, if you're an avid reader of the Miami Herald, there's a great article talking about the port resiliency, and as it relates to an airport facility, a port facility in the middle of a city, as it relates to what are we doing to be good stewards, right? Ships, crews, forklifts, a lot of stuff going on, and the stuff kind of goes up in the air, knocks, socks, particular matter, all this sort of stuff. And it seems to be like a new kind of frontier, not to say that it wasn't there before, but something as it relates to, the environment side was always over here, right? And then transportation was here, engineering and planning was there. But now, as we kind of get into this, 3.0, if you will, it's kind of intermingling together, and it's complicated. And it's just not Miami, but a lot of metropolitan cities are looking at this kind of stuff, and counties, and of how we address this. I know Mayor Cava has been very aggressive in looking at these sorts of things. So we're looking at, I'm excited, that we're kind of looking at this kind of stuff moving forward. But it puts a new twist to. It's just not, asphalt and trucks and goods movement, and coming in and out of the port, but it's all these other things that, well, where do you put it? Great
So-
presentation, Mike.
Thank you.
Yeah. If I could piggyback on what Juan just said as well, when we're thinking about Biden's infrastructure plan, which is still in the future, but just thinking about the different electric charging stations, and I think in the news you had Elon Musk talk about working on another tunnel. I'm sure that has more to do with passenger than freight, but in my mind, I'm thinking these are the kinds of sort of forward-thinking projects that we ought to be kind of keeping an eye on in terms of what makes sense, to Juan's point, not just for freight, but environmentally, from a transportation standpoint. All of that we need to be thinking as we're beginning to see sort of seeds planting here and there around some additional tunnel work, and which is, every time I think about tunneling, I think of, is this the limes? We're built out of limestone, so how does that work exactly? But hey, we did it with the port right on to the I-95. So can't say it can't be done, but just it is interesting. We are living in some interesting times, and there's some new ideas, some bold ideas that people are thinking about. So I too am excited about what's ahead for us in this community, for sure. I will ask one thing. I always look, whenever I look at the map of Florida, and I think about demographics in terms of population size, around the different counties. I'm always surprised when I see that Miami-Dade County only has one project given the size of our population. Is that just I don't know, a outlier, or is it just we just don't have projects going on? What would you say accounts for the fact that we only have one project going on in Miami-Dade County, given the size of our population?
I can make a
Oh,
general observation
sorry.
just to
Go ahead,
say
Mike.
that, I was just going to say, this list, the most projects that Miami could have on this list as we've defined it is 3. I think in the earlier years, Kevin had 2, maybe 3 projects on each of the other years. This last year, they chose to put 1 on the list. But keep in mind, this is not a list of all the projects in Miami-Dade County. This is just a one facet of a list of some priority projects for MPOAC to advocate for. And when Carlos just brought up that map for that corridor, there were 5 or 6 or 7 projects on that one map, and he talked about 2 of them being put together. So if you look at the work program for Miami-Dade County versus some of the others, I imagine, given the magnitude of some of those projects, Carlos could probably add to this, but I would assume that your number is as big or bigger than a lot of the other districts or counties that are out there. So this is just a snapshot of one way to look at freight priorities.
Right, I would agree.
If I may add, Mike, Stanley, one thing also is that you have to remember it's restricted to the what can be done. As mentioned, it has to be a roadway on the National Highway Freight Network. So it can't be just a random street like say Port Boulevard, for example. And as was mentioned before, I don't know if you would come in at that time yet, Mike. Stanley, but rail projects and such aren't included. North Florida is trying to get those included for future, but it's not included as of now. So.
Right, if I may add a few points on that same subject, as Mike pointed out, I happen to have a list, a laundry list that I call of recommendations that are coming out of the freight planning efforts that we've done, whether it's a town of Medley, in and around the Miami River, Hialeah, Homestead underway right now, Doral. I mean, I have hundreds. Okay, last time I checked, I have a bank of project list that includes over 500 recommendations. Those are actually on the freight side. Yeah, there may be some minor improvements in there, but I guess the point being here is we wanted to concentrate on priorities, on big ticket items, those that are actually at different stages in the production cycle, be able to advocate and as Mike pointed out, influence the department's opinion and priorities. And that has shown to be effective, at least in District 6. I can certainly come up with a large number of priorities and number of projects in Miami-Dade County, but we have chosen to be very and extremely selective in terms of what we want to advocate and be ready to make the business case, right? That's how I see it. Three priorities may really turn into a really single priority, or hundreds of priorities in terms of recommended projects could very well be 5. Really, that should be at the top of the list. So I think that gives you a perspective. If you look at our work program, we have several freight projects in this category. I will point out to the Golden Glades Interchange roadway projects. Those are on hold right now, but there's about 10 projects out there that can very well be priorities. As it is right now, we're kind of backing a little bit on those priorities because there's some issues with a Florida gas transmission line. So we're trying to come to the table with a utility owner to figure out the types of projects that we can implement without impacting Florida gas transmission up in the Golden Glades area. So I think that gives you a bit of perspective and it clarifies the process and answers, I think, in my opinion, the question in terms of number of projects that are listed here.
I would like to add too, and just for some of the new members and people listening in, I kid with Carlos, but he's literally the hardest working man in show business. If I can take a passage from The Godfather of Soul, but as it relates to what he's been doing for the past several years, as it relates to cluster plans, Hialeah, Doral, Medley, as it relates to prioritizing our projects to Tallahassee, the Miami River that he mentioned as it relates to potentially moving cargo onto the river, and looking at that, examining that. That's just for our county, but what he has to do is, like Mike said, there's 27 MPOs, 67 counties, everybody's knocking on the door, who gets what, and one of the great things about Miami is it is Miami, but it is Miami. So, the other counties, God love them, will say, well, why is it always Miami? And, as it relates to prioritizing and really kind of a return on investment, this cost benefit analysis, we really have to do our legwork. And I think Carlos, since I know him, he's been kind of doing it, just making sure that we have that justification in there. So I think with Kevin and the FTAC and the MPO, TPO, I think we're very well represented, but, and then DOT, has to pick and choose as it relates to, this one today, that one tomorrow. But my hat's off to Carlos for what he's been doing for us and just representing this committee.
I have a question. I have a question for either Carlos or Michael. Is there any update concerning the Gratney extension, the 924? I haven't heard about that in a while.
That's an MDX project. I think we would have to follow up with the folks from MDX.
Okay.
And as you may recall, I think my memory serves me correctly. Basically, MDX's work program is still on hold given the state's legal entanglement. Let's just put it that way with the Expressway Authority.
Okay, thank you for the update.
Mhm.
Mr. Castro minored in legal studies before he went into engineering and transportation.
Legal entanglements, right? That was extremely politically correct.
Yes.
I'm walking a fine line here.
That's why we.
As a state agency representative and our friends and partners from MDX, right?
That's why we have the best.
All right. So any more questions for Mike?
I guess this is John
Okay.
Don here.
Go ahead, John.
Just curious about 107th Avenue. We've talked about that a couple of times. South of Okeechobee Road. If it looks like there's any movement on that, crossing Okeechobee Road, and what the latest is on the area north of Okeechobee Road going up into the Flagler County Line Development and the Dream Mall. Nobody knows.
Crickets.
I don't have anything.
John, who was that question directed to? George?
I just didn't know if anyone, does anyone have any update on, do you know anything from the DOT's perspective? Or is that all really county roads and local roads that you really have no involvement with?
I'm going to defer the question to a later date. How about that? I don't think I'm qualified to answer that right now. I have to look at specifics, but I'm sure there are several county municipal roads involved. Our footprint towards that area is limited. Turnpike is one. And that's certainly a separate agency. But we have several projects in the Turnpike. But I would have to look at a map. I'm not too familiar right now with the upgrades and work program in that area. I know 170th, there's an upcoming interchange in and around the 170th street. That's Turnpike interchange. We do have some, we have, thank you, Victoria. And I believe we do have some potential projects in Miami Gardens Drive ourselves as an agency. That is a state road, District 6.
Nothing about the crossing at Okeechobee Road, is there?
I don't believe so, John.
Thanks.
So before
Yeah,
Carlos has to put a shingle on his door saying JD, remember the conversation, as a workshop, the conversations have to be directly related to the presentation. So if we're straying too far, we need to pull everybody back in center here. So, all right. So, but I think after John, anybody has any more questions for Mike, or we're all done? All right.
No, I guess just the only other one is, were we going to ask for anything beyond the Golden Glades interchange? Is anything else being discussed now?
Well, like I said, that's what Carlos and I are doing right now, and that's why we came to you all at the FTAC to see if you have any ideas as to projects that would be or could be looked at. So the discussions we've had, we've been talking about various things like I forgot now, but that's part of what we're looking for, to see what if you all had anything to come forward. If not, then we'll just go with what we have and vet on that, and then send that off to the MPOAC.
But Kevin, I think your point in terms of getting feedback from the committee, I think it might be beneficial to hear from the committee at some point in terms of potential projects that they may see in and around their areas of importance.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I should add as well for the committee members, this limitation issue, as far as the discussion, can be quickly solved with an action item or an agenda item, a casual action item or agenda item, right? Other items. Then we can talk about anything you guys want, and I'm more than happy to answer those questions too.
But unfortunately, we can't have any action items on the agenda because it's a workshop, so. And that's a catch. And if we have any action items, then it becomes an official meeting and we have to meet in person. So that will happen eventually. We just do not know when.
Oh, I see.
All right.
Well, thank you very much for letting me.
Thank you very
letting
much,
me give you
Mike,
guys an update.
and drive safely to your next meeting.
Peace.
Thanks. Thanks, guys. Have a
Thank you,
good-
Michael.
Great
Great presentation.
Thank you.
All right, so as you can see on our screen, our next workshop is going to be on March 10th, 2021. The agenda for that will be to be determined, and we'll see what happens at that time, whether we're still meeting virtually or if we're meeting in person or et cetera, et cetera. If anybody has now the comments, we're going to go ahead and close the meeting. So go ahead, Mike.
Kevin, I sent you the CB Q4 2020 industrial market view. If you feel like sending it out to the committee members, maybe they'll find some of the information in there helpful. If you don't have it, I'll send it to you again.
Yes, I saw the email, so I'll forward that to the FTAC members this afternoon.
And then I was just going to add that Florida Automated Vehicles Conference, which is the automated, connected, electric, and shared vehicles. This year, last year we had it in Miami, and Kevin, you were there. A few of us were. It was really interesting. This year it's all virtual. So they had a guy named Jonas, Adam Jonas of Morgan Stanley, did the first presentation in November. And it really was extraordinary. You would think it would be kind of dry. He was getting into what we were just talking about a few minutes ago, about the sustainability of freight and all that, getting into electrified freight. There's a big push on that with the post office, federal vehicles and all. And he got into what the real implications are on an everyday basis. It's about an hour and a half. It's on the website. Kevin, I sent it to you. We could probably share it with everybody. The second installment of that's coming up at the end of the month. It really is a worthwhile hour and a half spent. In fact, the first one was entertaining enough that you could even watch it in the evening and have a bite to eat while you do it. So I recommend it. Thanks.
All right. All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead. Somebody say something? Okay. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close the meeting. The time right now is 3:04. And have a great day, everyone, and have a good President's Day weekend. Bye.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
See everybody.
Thank you.
Be safe.